Naval Intelligence Report, for example, Russian air defense radar platforms such as Top Plate and Tombstone have been key to improving the plan's naval air defense capability. At the same time, Russian air defense platforms and the new Chinese derivatives have greatly increased the capability and range of China's naval air defense platforms. Having capable long-range air defense systems is crucial because it complicates the task of U.S. pilots seeking to strike Chinese warships at sea. They force those pilots to make the kind of decision they haven't had to face since Vietnam, either enter their engagement zone and risk destruction or fire from greater range, which greatly impedes the attack's effectiveness. From the chart, you can see that China has been catching up rapidly to the U.S. in terms of naval air defense capability. While the U.S. maintains the advantage, to be sure, China has narrowed the gap considerably. You have to keep in mind, prior to the longest range legacy Chinese naval air defense platform would barely have shown up on the chart. Thus, Russian defense assistance has also been crucial to help China to overcome the second of the three major deficiencies: its weakness, its inability to defend itself adequately against long-range air and missile strikes. So having surveyed the situations, let's now re-examine my original claims. If I've done my job correctly, it should be quite evident now that Russian defense assistance has been crucial to development of China's surface and anti-surface warfare capabilities. The transfer of advanced sovereignty destroyers and ASCMs like the Sunburn have led to a major upgrade in China's precision strike capability. At the same time, provision of advanced Russian air defense platforms, such as the Gargoyle, gave China its first true long-range naval air defense capability. Collectively, they represented a great leap forward for China's maritime forces. More recently, the development of new Chinese supersonic anti-ship cruise missiles, all based on Russian technology, represent further large gains for the fleet's precision strike capability. Similarly, deployment of new Chinese air defense platforms incorporating Russian technology show that China is still in the process of absorbing the vast amounts of Russian technology previously transferred to it. These systems are now making a real difference in the competition for naval supremacy in the Western Pacific. Look, I don't mean to imply that the Chinese remain totally dependent on Russia, or far from it. No one would disagree that the Chinese have made up considerable ground in increasing their self-sufficiency, especially in certain areas. But I would contend that the Chinese still have a ways to go, and their fleet could still benefit in substantial ways from additional Russian defense assistance. For example, Chinese anti-submarine warfare capabilities still remain deficient. Russia, with its long history of developing anti-submarine warfare systems dating back through the Cold War, could help China to overcome this third and final remaining deficiency as well. Another example, China recently agreed to purchase the S-400 from Russia. The S-400 is Russia's latest and longest range air defense platform. If the Chinese purchase the naval variant, which they tend to do when they buy Russian air defense platforms, that could result in a near further doubling of the range of China's fleet air defense system. Finally, Russia is not standing still. It continues to upgrade its existing platforms and developing new systems all the time. For example, Russia is reportedly developing a high supersonic anti-ship cruise missile called the Yukon, a third missile which wasn't reportedly transferred to the Chinese, capable of achieving speeds of up to Mach 4.0. The Chinese would be very greatly interested in obtaining such a system if they could. So Yogi Berra once famously said, "It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. But if the past is any indicator, I would predict that much of this new Russian technology will find its way into China's maritime forces." Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Paul. Now let's move over to discussion of some of the wider strategic context here. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Tom Carrico.
A very thoughtful and detailed analysis, really of an important problem, including, by the way, attention to these hardware matters. You know, I think it's very easy to just elide over these things and glide over the details, and this is the kind of analysis that I think there needs to be a lot more of. As I was listening to Paul and you making the historical references, for example, to the 1990s, I was thinking, in a way, an even larger scale. These are the kind of systems, the lower end sub MTCR type ranges that just don't get a lot of attention. And I think that's one of the things that makes this report relatively unique, is that they're not quite as exotic as talking about the DF41 or the latest DF5 or something like that, but they matter. And I think one sense in which they matter is just the technological, commercial, and geopolitical trends that have conspired, and I think this report points in that direction, conspired for increased global supply and demand of high precision, high velocity, missile-based strike delivery systems and the counters thereunto, right? In 1959, Bernard Brodie wrote the book Strategy in the Missile Age. And I think it's the proliferation of these things. And by the way, the proliferation as a matter of policy, in this case, the proliferation of these systems that's in a way contributing to a new missile age. So let me, Paul laid out a number of these systems in particular, and really if you follow the footnotes, you recognize that there just aren't that many folks out there talking about these things, which is in part of the problem. So let me give some context and some of comments about systems at the edges, which in a way go beyond the self-conscious scope of the report. First, the context. Zach is going to get a little bit more into the regional, but I think obviously the questions of what exactly Russia's intentions are, is there a stopping point? Is there a tipping point before Russia goes too far? Or is it in fact the case, and again, I think the scope of this report to surface warfare for the Navy, for Chinese Navy, does that already point in a way to Russia's self-conscious limitations, that it's not merely Katie bar the door, that these are precisely the sort of capabilities that they don't mind China having to help counter the U.S. Navy. So in a way, Russia's selling China the rope to help hang the U.S. Navy. Some of the systems, of course, that Russia's also working on that make the news are whether it's the RS-26 or the Glick'em, for land-based concerns. We think about those in terms of NATO, but of course, if you're Russia looking to your east, you're thinking about those in terms of China. I think the question, does Russia just need the money that bad? Paul, do you see this as irresponsible and short-sighted sales, or is it a strategic partnership, admittedly a limited one for these kinds of systems? I think another takeaway from this report is that we talk so much about A2AD, we talk so much about anti-access area denial, but going back to my larger trends, this is going to be a missile-rich environment. So much of what goes into A2AD is going to be, and is, of course, missile-based. China is pursuing a lot of these things and using mass to challenge us. And it appears that they're doing so for three reasons. One, targeting the U.S. fleet. One, I think being able to target our U.S. allies. And three, U.S. bases. And this, again, admittedly is getting a little bit beyond the scope of this report. And so I think it's worth raising the questions, okay, now what? What do we do about this? Well, the kind of systems that Paul is detailing for air defenses, S-300, and perhaps more, means, of course, that the U.S. is going to have to invest in more standoff and penetration weapons, both sophisticated to penetrate and presumably enough of them to saturate. This means, for example, the conversation about LRSO and LRSB for the next budget cycles. The second point would be that Chinese anti-ship cruise missiles and anti-ship ballistic missiles means, and I don't see really any way around this, that we're going to have to continue to invest and perhaps do a lot more for fleet and point missile defenses. Missile defense versus Chinese threats. This is not necessarily the most exotic, long-range strategic systems, of course, and I think it's notable, by the way, that I think throughout the report, Paul, you didn't mention the word nuclear. What we're talking about is really conventional threats. But I think being willing to have the conversation, to pursue as a matter of effort, as a line of effort, to have the defenses against Chinese missile threats, I think that's something we should hear more about. You see, for example, the Navy already deploying and continued tests for the Standard Missile-6, having both cruise missile defense and terminal ballistic missile defense capabilities. That's a piece of it. You hear a lot of interest in directed energy, especially for the fleet, for example. You know, when you looking at the mass that you're talking about, Paul, you need a lot of shots and quick shots. The one thing faster than those supersonic sea-skimming cruise missiles is a laser. But those are probably not the whole solution. And again, although I would say, favorite thing to talk about is this bright, shiny object of directed energy. Even in his presentation a couple weeks ago in Alabama, the head of Northcom, Admiral Gorton, he said, for the foreseeable future, we're probably still going to need rockets to kill rockets. So I think probably thinking about directed energy or railguns as the replacement for those probably isn't the right way to think about it, but rather a mix. Another thing that's at the edges of this, of course, is the Chinese investment in missile-based, missile-boosted hypersonics. The U.S. is testing these things about once every 3 years or so. We've had mixed success. The Chinese are testing about every 3 months. That's pretty remarkable. And that's going to require some kind of counter, right? And probably different kinds of counters, a layered counter for those kind of threats. And beyond active defense that I'm talking about, also passive measures, whether it's hardening, but also deception and dispersion. Of course, the Navy's concept of distributed lethality comes to mind here. But a piece of that, I think, is going to be distributed defense. The idea that you're going to be able to hit these things, or that you would want to plan on striking these things left of launch, involves a lot of risk. And third, I think we're going to need to do this for our allies and for our partners in the region. We need to proliferate counters to these things. The anti-ship cruise missiles, much less sophisticated ones than the Club family, which, by the way, has great commercials on YouTube, the Club missiles. Proliferating counters to those, we've seen these in real-life use against Israel in 2006, as well as on other occasions. Doing so is not merely to build their own partner capacity for their own sake, but of course to alleviate strain on our forces. I think the degree to which the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Army is stretched in terms of missile defense capability in particular in the area is only going to get worse. The Navy's requirements are here, and what we have right now are down here. And likewise, the number of THAAD batteries is up here, 9, and we're at 4 right now. And they don't have any plans to get beyond 7. That kind of tension is not going to get any better unless we encourage our allies to do more of this on their own as well. I think I'll leave it off there and turn it over to Zach.
Well, first, Paul, let me join in congratulating you on what's, I think, a very important report on a subject that doesn't get as much attention as it should. So I think that's wonderful work, and I'll look forward to seeing the air version and the land version within the next couple of months, I hope. That's right. I want to talk a little bit about the political aspects. Tom talked about some of the military ones, and I think we all like to delve into those shiny objects, as Tom said. But on the political side, there's some real difficult questions to be asked here, and I don't think we quite know the answers to many of them. So I want to pose the questions, and hopefully we can answer them during the panel discussion, and there are many of you I see out in the audience who are